Apple really wants you to buy an M2 MacBook Pro, and for some very specific reasons. But I say stop, do not buy one, and I will explain why. This is my M1 MacBook Pro, and I have not touched it in over a year. And we told you guys not to buy the M1 version as well, just get the M1 MacBook Air. And it turns out the M1 MacBook Air is now the world's best selling laptop, as Apple showed off on stage. They also showed off the M2 chip, which has multiple improvements, and the fact that it is in this new MacBook Pro, how great it is, and the fact that it has a fan to cool this thing down. Now, when these new Macs came out with the first Apple Silicon laptops, we all expected that the MacBook Pro would be the one to buy, even though it costs $300 more because of that active cooler. And did some very in-depth testing with thermals, throttling, we found that the fact that it has a cooler doesn't really help that much. And even though the M1 MacBook Air did get hot and it did throttle, even if we threw the craziest test on it, for example, 8K Red Raw exporting, you really didn't get that much faster performance, and that is actually counting the fact that we have the base model that comes with a 7-core GPU compared to the 8-core GPU in the M1 MacBook Pro. But back then, we had a $300 price gap between the base models of the Air and the Pro, which made the Air really a no-brainer. But now, with the redesigned MacBook Air, that comes in at $1,200, so it's only a $100 difference, and that comes with the slower 8-core graphics option at the base, or you actually get the same price if you upgrade to a 10-core. So now, does that mean that the MacBook Pro with M2 is actually worth buying, especially because it has that cooler? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what else was upgraded and if it's actually worth it. I think you'll be quite surprised. Now, the first thing that really stood out to me at WWDC is that Apple was really focusing on the M2 chip for the MacBook Pro announcement. And here at the info page, we see that it is the same design, and Apple is really pushing that M2 chip. We have up to a 40% improvement in performance compared to the M1 model, 6 times faster than Intel, of course, and some great battery life. Apple is saying new chip, new chapter for the 13-inch MacBook Pro, but I don't really think that's true because this same chip is available in the MacBook Air, and for the rest of the MacBook Pro, it is the old chapter. This is a design that came out in 2016. And let me show you what else has changed other than this chip, and then we're also gonna talk about throttling and if you really need that fan for performance. We have this gorgeous Retina display, and Apple is saying, see the better picture. But in reality, you are not seeing the better picture because this is the same display that we've had for years. And it still only supports millions of colors, 16.7 million, compared to the M2 MacBook Air that actually supports over 1 billion colors. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a bad display. You still get 500 nits of brightness, you have better color accuracy, P3 wide color, you have true tone that's nice and convenient to switch to your environment, but the MacBook Pro's always had a better display than the MacBook Air, but not anymore. Now, as far as cameras and microphones, you can be seen and be heard, but it's gonna be the exact same as before. And that was actually one of the biggest weaknesses and complaints about the previous M1 MacBook Pro. It has a 720p webcam built in. Here's how it looks like compared to the new 1080p cameras. That is actually what's coming in the MacBook Air. So that hasn't changed, and it's a shocking difference. Now, as far as microphones, those also have not changed, whereas the MacBook Air, they've updated those ones. Here's what it sounded like before. This is the microphone quality of the M1 MacBook Air's microphones, and the M2 MacBook Air has upgraded microphones. And this is the quality of the M1 MacBook Pro's microphones, and they're staying the same with the M2 MacBook Pro. The MacBook Air's microphone is actually quite a bit louder than the MacBook Pro's studio microphone, but I do think the studio does sound a little bit less boomy. Now, as far as speakers, the speakers in here are exactly the same. They're not bad, but what is shocking is that the MacBook Air previously actually sounded better. It was both louder and had better bass than the MacBook Pro. Go ahead and take a listen. Now with this new 2022 M2 MacBook Pro, the speakers have not changed. They are identical. And I don't want to make this a full-on comparison to the new MacBook Air, but that one has quad speakers now. They're going to fire upwards towards the screen and through the keyboard, and they're going to sound even better. Now, personally, seeing as none of these core things and things that were an issue before have changed, that is quite a bit of a disappointment if you're spending this much money. And a lot of people are gonna start upgrading the SSD and the RAM as well. Now I'll go into those configurations and my thoughts on it, but when we take a look at this design, if you're spending that much money on a laptop that you are gonna have for many years, do you really wanna have this older design? I mean, maybe if you love the touch bar, that is one reason to buy it, but the fact that it has an older keyboard layout, it also only has 2 Thunderbolt ports. Just like before, you don't have a MagSafe charger for that extra convenience and to free up a port for you to use. We don't have an SD card reader included like we do with the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And other than that, nothing at all has changed. So we know that this is going to be the next MacBook Pro that's going to be replaced as soon as Apple can. Now I know some of you guys are going to say, man, this has the fan. You are going to get better performance than the MacBook Air. And that is absolutely correct. Apple's own charts show that is 1.4 times faster compared to 1.3 times faster with the MacBook Air. Now, of course, if you're doing simple tasks like most people do, or even short bursts during 4K editing with short bursts of rendering, that's not going to be hugely taxing. And like I mentioned, with the previous MacBook Air, it was not that much slower for heavy, long, intensive tasks. For example, exporting high-resolution raw images. When you're waiting close to a half hour, a couple minutes isn't a huge deal breaker. And that's also including the cheaper 7-core model, not the 8-core. This time around, we will see how the thermal performance does with the MacBook Air, and also if we're gonna be able to hack it like we did with the M1 MacBook Air, add those thermal pads and get it to actually outperform the MacBook Pro, which kind of blows your mind. How is that possible? Well, that's possible because Apple doesn't actually ramp up the fan soon enough. So the MacBook Pro does actually throttle, whereas the one that's fanless, there's no fan to adjust. So when we added the thermal pad, it actually outperformed it. If you guys want to see us using the thermal pad hack on the new MacBook Air, make sure you click that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on that video. When we look at the full detailed specifications, what has changed other than that chip? Nothing. I mean, the only thing they're doing now is giving you a 67-watt charger instead of a 61-watt charger. The battery life is the same, the battery is the same, the screen, speakers, every single thing is the same, as well as the prices. Now, I know some people say, I'm buying that just because I want the fan, I want to get the maximum performance. But honestly, if you're somebody that really cares about the performance, once you grab one of these and you add the RAM, because you need more RAM if you care about performance and productivity, you upgrade your storage, now you're only looking at a $300 difference compared to the 14-inch MacBook Pro that not only has way better microphones, speakers, webcam, it also has the larger display that's 1000 nits sustained up to 1600 nits for HDR. You have 3 Thunderbolt ports, a separate charger, you have an SD card reader, you have dual fans built in that will actually run quieter. So once you add those, you are getting so much more bang for your buck, spending a little bit more and getting more graphics performance and more processor performance as well. So if you're somebody that's buying the M2 MacBook Pro because of the performance and you're gonna be upgrading it, I would say don't buy it anyways, spend a little bit more money and get yourself a 14-inch that is redesigned, and that design is gonna stick around for at least another 5 years with those extras and not get quickly replaced. So why in the world did Apple keep this outdated MacBook and they're selling it for the same price and they just put the M2 chip in there? Well, I think it's for two reasons. The first one is because of profit margins. They're gonna make more money selling this old MacBook the way it's been for a long time than the redesigned M2 version. It is gonna be a lot of money for them. They don't have to have that expensive screen with the cutouts. They don't have to have MagSafe included into it. It's not a new chassis, none of that. It's the old one. And two, just to get people to want to upgrade from it once they add those extra, the storage and RAM to the 14-inch model. I mean, even if you go on their website and you click on MacBook Pro, you see that they have it on the left-hand side looking all dinky and small, and they actually put the 16-inch closer to it, which they usually don't do, and then the 14-inch to make you want to buy that instead. And that gets you to spend more money, which is true, but at the same time, you are getting that better laptop. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't need the high-end upgrades, that's where I would say take a look once again at buying either something that's lower like this or the redesigned M2 MacBook Air that's also gonna stick around for a long time and does have a screen that supports over 1 billion colors and has the extra MagSafe charging and the other updates as well. You guys let me know your thoughts down below. We are also gonna be doing a direct comparison on those two MacBooks. So if you guys wanna see the M2 MacBook Air versus M2 MacBook Pro in detail, click that circle above. Check out one of those great videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.